no pen, look more, no hands, look more, no frame, no shame. Numb me up like cocaine, can't focus, shaky can. Which moment makes a man? 'Cause I'm hoping it just begins.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Robert Groves, your host for the Groves Connection podcast. The Groves Connection brings you intimate conversations with pundits, providers, patients, leaders, and lay people, all to help us understand a contradiction. How can our healthcare system be both magnificent and yet so deeply flawed? We're going inside healthcare to talk candidly with those who know. What they have to say may delight, surprise, frustrate, or at times even anger you. But I invite you to get curious and listen to the truth about healthcare and those who want to fix it. Maybe the answers have been there all along. We just need to make the connection. Are you ready to connect? Scott Shreeve, welcome to the Groves Connection.
Hey, Robert, appreciate being here and look forward to chatting today.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this conversation as well, and you're doing some really cool stuff with a little company called Crossover Health, and so I want to get to that. But, what I like to start with is learning a little bit about you, and so let's start with, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Redwood City, which is up near Cupertino, and my family moved to Fresno, California. So if you're familiar with the geography of California, It's in the middle of the state. They call it the breadbasket of California, but it's very much rural ranch land. I grew up on a small little farm, if you will, that we had chickens and cows and horses, and so I grew up being responsible for feeding those animals every morning and night, and learning to garden, and of course it was a beautiful playland for being a kid growing up. And there's canals and ranches and groves of trees to run through, so it was a wonderful place to grow up. Very strong community. Interesting enough, the Clovis Unified School District is extremely well known for not only their athletics but also academics, and so this was the type of community where I liken it to West Texas, where the whole community would come out on Friday night for the football games, and there's a lot of support. There was a rodeo growing up, so a lot of strong community, and so very formative for me, kind of growing up there. So
when most of the country hears about California, they don't often think about the rural side of California. It's the coastal cities, but there really is a very traditional way of life in Central California, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so, everyone thinks of LA and San Francisco, but there's so much more to California. And so where I grew up, again, is kind of that breadbasket, really good core American values, people, citizenship and competing and being in a community like that was a great place to grow up. And so I think that was unique experience. So yeah, a lot of athletic opportunities there, and learned a ton through that. My dad, interestingly enough, used to buy and sell farms. And so as a young kid in the summers, he'd drop me and my brother off, and we'd have to go weed these huge rows of grapes and stuff. And of course he didn't need us to weed those, but that would be his way to kind of teach us how to work, and pretty unique way to grow up in that kind of a setting. So, and
that's, I love that, that row of weeds must have looked endless to you at that age, but a great move by your dad, I think. So talk to us about, were you involved in sports in high school? Did you play any sports?
Yeah, that was a big part of what I did and learned growing up, a lot of good values from that. So I started playing basketball, football in elementary school, and what's kind of interesting there, again, because they're so organized, that's a big part of the community there, is the elementary schools would be running the same offensive plays as the high school. And so you kind of go through this system. But I had a lot of great coaches along the way, learned a ton about teamwork. Fresno is very well known for every summer you measure how many days in a row it's over 100 degrees. And so we would be just the value of teamwork and building towards something and accomplishing something together, was really great. I had the privilege to be a quarterback. I didn't want to be one, but I kind of got put in that position. And so, you learn a lot about being a leader and first one on the field, last one off, and trying to help your teammates. And even though you're a little bit more maybe in the spotlight, to kind of share that spotlight with everyone else, because they're actually the ones that are helping you look good in your role. And so really they were applicable, a lot of things, learning, even into medicine.
Yeah. So, as I've done, dozens of these interviews, one of the things that I uncover each and every time is that accomplished professionals always remember mentors. There are folks along the way that had a key role in shaping you as a human being, and it sounds like maybe some of the coaches that you participated with in high school may have played that role. Do you remember it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I had there was a kind of advanced curriculum that was taught by a really interesting man. His name was Gary Cohagen. I still, distinctly remember him, but he used to be a former football player for the 49ers. Just a hulk of a man. He was a lineman, but he was a science teacher. And really I still remember distinctly, he taught us all about the animals in the tide zones of California. And then we did a field trip to those tide zones to really learn that. And I really learned to love science and reading and learning. And at that age, you're just trying to be cool and play video games and sports. Right. But I really learned that, wow, there's a lot of cool things to learn. And then when you actually got to go to those tide pools and see the animals you learned about and understand all those things, it was really eye-opening. And then, of course, as I got older, other, teachers, but also, I really remember the coaches. You spend so much time with them, but, teaching life lessons and the value of hard work and teamwork and, learning to be confident but humble and learning to achieve, set hard goals and do hard things and then see the fruits of that effort pay off.
Were you always interested in the sciences? Is that something that you pursued in high school?
It's kind of funny. I enjoyed the sciences. I love learning about biology and all that. Another kind of factor is in all my athletics, we had kind of this constant force. We did have a local pediatrician who was the team doctor. And Dr. Richard Jones was another person that had a big impact on me that I really, I remember going to his office. He was my own pediatrician, but it was a funny story. They later on had to kick me out of the practice because I kept going back, even though I was like 21. They're like, hey, you got to find something else. So, I saw him as our team doctor. I saw kind of the work he did. I saw the impact he had on me and my family. I'm like, you know what? There's really something to applying that scientific knowledge, but a really human relationship and helping people be their best.
Yeah, so you knew you wanted to be a doctor by the time you were looking at colleges.
Yeah, so once I started, seeing that and then that proclivity towards sciences and just learning, then I'm like, I think I could combine those in this. And so I think as I headed to college, the first year or 2 years trying to figure out which direction you're going, but then really committing like, this is something I really want to do. I think I can have the impact. And I really valued the ability to have that kind of knowledge and to influence someone. But I kind of always had the ambition too, can I combine this with yet one more thing is I was always interested in technology and the impact of science and the new technology coming out to impact, human health and performance. And so that became an interest too, to kind of mix medicine, business, and technology. And again, you have to remember the era that I'm going to medical school in 1994 to 98, right? And that is the beginning of the internet. I mean, really starting to take, and I had all these friends in Silicon Valley that were going to work and do all these great startups. And, those first 2 years of medical school, I loved it because I was learning all that science coming back. But, you're in the library 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is when I hit the wards, when you hit that third year of medical school, you start doing rotations. I was a little bit culture shocked or whatever about how unhappy a lot of the people I was working with were.
Yes.
The big Hillary Clinton reform era, the golden era was kind of ending, and a lot of physicians were tired. They were burnt out. They were frustrated. And I felt that as a student. Because remember, I'm coming in with this idealized view of what medicine is, and I'm working with residents who are like, and then of course, just the way you learn in medicine through kind of that humiliation almost of, questions and answers you don't really know. You got to learn by experience. Things that are frustrating. To your point, medicine is so amazing and wonderful, but there are also some really big challenges that make it difficult. And so what that set in motion for me was like, wow, there's a lot of issues here. Why is it so inefficient? Why are people unhappy? That's translating into difficult care situations for the members. Why doesn't it work better for them? Why are they frustrated? And that set in motion these ideas of like business, medicine, technology. Here's a lot of problems. Can we do this differently, or can we make it better? And the other interesting thing happened to me, Robert, is I was going through, I was like, all right, I'm doing pediatrics rotation. Okay, this is going to be the one. I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't love this. And then, okay, it's going to be surgery. I'm going to love,
Yeah.
And like, I got to the end of my 4th year and I was like, oh man, I didn't really find anything that really spoke to me. And literally, I actually considered going to business school at that time.
Wow.
And again, this was the height of the internet, the bubble and everything.
Yeah.
And I had an instinct impression just to like, you know what? You've put all this work in. You need to finish your residency. You need to become like a real doctor. You can't like bail out right now. You won't have the credibility.
Yep.
And so you need to finish. And I think as I was having all those emotions and like, going through med school is challenging, but like I was just really, it was like a little bit existential for me.
Yeah.
And so as I got through the different specialties, I kind of started to gravitate towards specialties that actually, you can have the impact, but also that you have a little bit of flexibility to consider other aspects of medicine.
Right.
And interestingly enough, I ended up in emergency medicine.
Yeah.
Emergency medicine, in my mind, provided that kind of intense, really challenging, stimulating environment, but also there was periods away from that where you could pursue other interests. And so, as you know, Robert, from your own experience, like every discipline or specialty has its personality.
Yes,
and so
indeed.
Into emergency medicine, I became a trained hypertasker, right? That's just the nature of that type of work. And then it also provided an opportunity to explore some other interests because of, you're on and then you have a little bit of time off.
Yeah.
One of the things I did during my residency is I did a rotation on Silicon Valley. I went down for 1 month. One of my rotations was to work with a venture capital firm that there was a physician who worked there, and he was willing to take me on for a 30-day period. And that exposed me to that real combination of business medicine and technology. And I'll never forget this. My first day showing up, they took me to a meeting literally in someone's garage in Menlo Park. They were using Xerox technology to like pipette DNA into like, I can't even really remember at the time, but it was just like, really fascinating. And during the month that I was there, I was able to be a part of that team to assess that company, to do the diligence. And they literally funded the company the last day I was there. And that process, that's a very fast process. So I can't remember all the particulars, but I just remember distinctly showing up in the garage and then watching this group get funded. And I was like, wow.
One of the other things that occurred to me as you were talking about choosing a specialty, and it's something that those maybe outside of medicine don't get right away, but certainly primary care is generalist, certainly internal medicine is generalist, but so is emergency medicine. You have to know a little bit about everything in order to function in that role. And I saw critical care the same way. It's like, I'm a generalist, but I need the adrenaline. I need that excitement to keep me engaged. And emergency medicine is very much like that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, there's a little bit of, that intensity where you're really in situations where your skills, you can see them really have an impact. And then, of course, there are periods away from that intensity, right? And so I think, critical medicine shares that with emergency medicine, and anesthesia is kind of in that domain as well. Mm-hmm. The way I ended that practice or that rotation was, my exit interview, I was like, well, hey, how do I become a venture capitalist? How do I do this? And his advice to me was very clear, which is like, listen, you got to be an operator. And I'm like, an operator? And again, I'm thinking like a surgeon or something. No, he's like, no, you got to run a company. You got to learn this. And once you stepped into running a company, you'll then be in a better position to be an investor someday.
So you are on this track, this entrepreneurial track, basically from the day you started medical school, and you talk yourself into finishing that, did you practice actively after that? What was your first job after you?
I did, yeah. So the journey, as you continue the journey, then I had this idea that, hey, I'd love to, get involved in this some way. And so on my third year of residency, as I was finishing it up, I started to look for jobs and so forth. And so I took a job in Tucson where I trained, and it was a full emergency medicine role. And again, taking advantage of those blocks of intense clinical work and then a little bit of time off. So I ended up starting a company with my brother right after I finished residency.
Wow.
And so that first year after residency, you really focused on taking your boards. And so I took my boards and passed those. And then I had started this company with my brother, which was around electronic health records. And at the time, this is 2001, that was still kind of a novel, newer thing and just kind of taking hold. And so we ended up starting a company together. And that little company, interesting story, took the software from the Veterans Administration, and then we helped commercialize that for small to medium-sized community hospitals that couldn't afford Epic or Cerner. We were able to convert and commercialize that system for commercial use in these settings, and it was awesome.
That's clever. That is incredibly clever because it's public domain. Nobody has rights to it. And so you could just piggyback on top of that and create something that was much less expensive than the two going concerns. That's a really smart. Who came up with that idea? Was that your brother, you, or combo?
Yeah, my brother, interestingly enough, and maybe just the way that we were raised, he also went to med school and he did a combined MD MBA.
Huh. Okay.
And so he had a lot more exposure to kind of starting a company and the ideas around that. And so that was kind of the partnership that we formed to go after that opportunity.
You still work with your brother today? Is he?
Yeah. So we worked together for about 5 or 6 years, had an interesting experience with kind of how we exited the company. The company actually still exists and has continued to go on and do well, which is exciting. It's been almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And then I went off and kind of started crossover, and Steve kind of went on a different direction. So
Gotcha. So talk to me about, I think it's time to get down to brass tacks here. Talk to us a little bit about your current going concern, a company called Crossover Health. Where did that idea come from, and how did you get it started?
We ran Medsphere for about 5-6 years, which was really at the beginning of the electronic health wave. And the thing I took away from there was how technology can really impact the way care is delivered. And so having done that and had that experience with seeing how information can guide the decision-making and the care and so forth, I really wanted to figure out the care problem more. As an emergency medicine physician, I was always struck by the types of problems that would come to the ER, because the ER is kind of the care of last resort. And it always made me wonder, well, why is our primary care? Why isn't it working? Why aren't these people showing up or having, connection to a primary care office? And so as I started drilling into that, I read a book that was really impactful to me called Redefining Healthcare by Michael Porter. And this was all about the value equation for healthcare. So the health outcomes are what we should be fighting for, and the outcomes, he described it as redefining care value, and value is the outcome you achieve over the price that you pay to get that outcome.
Right.
And that little equation was somewhat novel, I guess, but he went through and described his thesis in gory detail. But the principles behind that, really, I walked away thinking, my gosh, primary care needs to be the foundation of our care system. It probably needs to be paid for differently. It needs to be delivered differently. But if you can engage people in the basics of their health and then make sure you steer, guide, and navigate them into the complexities of care and care systems and so forth, you're going to really have a health system, which we struggle to build today, right? And so these ideas of primary care became really formative to what I wanted to do. And so I was shaping these ideas, but at the time I was doing some, it was interesting. This might be fun for your audience, is that I started writing about this. And this is right when blogging was starting.
Yes.
And so I started putting these ideas out there, and people started to read them and comment and follow. And then I would get invited to speak. And then I got invited to do consulting projects. And then with the consulting projects, I could start to have a little bit of influence, but I couldn't get far enough. So I started running practices. I was doing practice management, helping people run their practices. But because they weren't my practices, I couldn't push it all the way.
Right.
And finally, I'm just like, forget it. I'm just going to create my own practice with all these ideas I've been spouting out for 5 to 6 years. I'm going to quit talking about it, and I'm going to do it. And so in 2010, we did it. We opened the first crossover health center with the idea that could we deliver great, what we started calling primary health. It was beyond primary care because it involved health coaching, fitness, mental health, like that full set of things that you could consider as basic good primary care. And we felt that combined offering really would add the value. And then, of course, you have to steer, guide, and navigate people into the secondary care system, which is why we added care navigation. But that is the quick arc of what led us to our crossover health.
Yeah, that's really cool. And one of the points that you're making that I want to emphasize, and it's been documented now over and over again, is that with the best way to deliver the complex care that we have in our system today is via primary care. And that really is the best foundation. It's the best outcomes, and it's the least expensive way to access the system. And so many of us have gotten used to, if I've got chest pain, I'll go see a cardiologist. If I've got joint pain, I'll go see an orthopedist. And that really is not the best way to manage health. Primary care should be foundational. Now, we learned, in the 80s that forced primary care.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pushback against that, let's say. But the bottom line is educating everyone that if you really want the best health and the best value for your money, start with good primary care. And that was the notion that it sounds like you realized. You came away with that same notion, and then you put it into action. So was it scary? I mean, or at this point, did you have so much confidence in what you were doing that you were, you felt good about being able to bootstrap this up and start something important? Well, looks like we've lost Scott for a moment. So as we wait for him to get back online, there are a couple of things that come to my mind as I've been listening to Dr. Shreeve, and one is, wow, talk about an entrepreneurial spirit. He is infused with it. And also he grew up at a time where there were a lot of models out there, a lot of competing models for what we ought to do in healthcare. And so I'll be fascinated to learn how he came up with this hybrid approach that is crossover health. One of the things that, here we go. Looks like he's coming back now.
Hey, Robert.
Hey there.
You were starting to go warbly, and then I lost you. So I'm not sure if that's on my end or...
Technology, right? Sometimes it doesn't play well with others. So I think what I was saying is the notion that primary care is foundational. You seem to have arrived at that very, very early. And I'm wondering, were you reading the literature? Because there's a ton of it suggesting that the lowest cost, best outcome is through a primary care strategy. What gave you the insight that was how you were going to build crossover health? Is it that's the place to start, or was it more intentional?
It's a good question. So again, Redefining Healthcare Value is the book by Porter. Once I read that, these ideas really started to generate. And what was interesting at the time, I was reading a ton. I was reading everything I could about building healthcare systems and what is required for a good system, which leads you very quickly to payment, right?
Right.
If you pay for things a certain way, they say architecture is destiny. So if the architecture of payment lends, then everything kind of morphs itself to fit to the payment model. And so again, I began to develop a lot of ideas around fee for service and, can you move to more value-based? And this was long before value-based was kind of like the thing, but just if you paid for it differently, if you offered a different set of service, different set of technology, could you create a great experience that people want to engage with? Because I had the same view that you did. The literature is very clear. HMOs actually did control cost.
During that era, quality actually improved as well. Very few people know that, but the quality of care was actually better during that era.
Yeah, I love that you highlight that because again, we just focus on the one aspect of the control and the compulsion and some of the restrictions. But what I always tell everyone, and we tell this to all of our employer clients, listen, if you want to manage healthcare costs, at some point you have to manage healthcare delivery. I can't send you to the buffet every night and hope you're going to lose weight. I need to somehow architect those choices a little bit differently. So what we've tried to do now, 20, 30 years later, is don't make it by compulsion, but make it by because the experience is so great. Kind of a concierge versus compulsion narrative. Like I create a great experience, I'm connected through technology, and I'm guiding and steering and nudging versus hitting you over the head with a hammer, blocking you from doing something. But I will tell you at the end of the day, Robert, you cannot control costs by sending people to Stanford's MRI machine. You've got to go to Valley Radiology where it's $400 versus $4,000. They just have a different cost structure, and you should use the right tool for the job. You go to Stanford when you have that crazy cancer that 4 of them show up a year.
Yeah.
Again, that's that care delivery idea. We think that primary care, if it's done right and done well, is in the best position to navigate you to not just the basics to keep you healthy, but 85% of the spending is in the specialty care. You need the steerage, the guidance, the coordination to get to those things. That's where all the savings is.
Right.
So we arrived at all these things pretty quickly. And I will tell you, to answer your question directly, a lot of it was reading. A lot of it also was writing, because writing was forcing me to get these ideas out there. And then, of course, I was speaking on the kind of the circuit at the time. But at the end of the day, nothing matters but putting your ideas and things into action and literally going into the market and competing in the contest of ideas and going out there and seeing if you could win business. You create enough value that people are willing to part with their hard-earned dollars to pay for your service. And that fire is where you really get to some resolve to build these solutions out there. And I will tell you, I am more convicted now, 20 years into this battle, than I've ever been before, that this is a key part of the answer to creating a healthcare system. And I really want to kind of bend my back in career to help solve this problem and be a part of that.
Yeah. One other question that I have, because so many entrepreneurs, especially those that came out of that, the California, Silicon Valley during that era, went directly to technology. They started a telemedicine company, or they started another technology, purely technology-based to support the system. You took the harder path of saying, no, I'm going to start with a practice and build the technology around that. How did you arrive at that decision? Because it seems the harder road to go.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it's a long, hard, lonely road sometimes, because all these beautiful flashing lights and unicorns.
Yep.
What I've always found is, the truth eventually comes out, and the value will become clear at some point. So, what I felt was, for basic primary care done right, done well, can truly influence the system. And I think there's a whole army of literature. The thing is it's not sexy. It's not the sizzle of the month. It is good basic blocking and tackling to build these relationships, smartly use technology, because at the end of the day, you have to increase the leverage in primary care. And that's one of the problems. If it's just one-to-one, I'm seeing my 15 to 30 patients a day. That was actually one of the problems I had in emergency medicine, is I would go do everything I could for those 30 people I'd see a day. And then the next day I'd just do it all over again. And I could never get upstream. I couldn't go beyond my 30. Could I get to 300? Could I get to 3,000? Could I get to 300,000? And in order to have that type of impact, you have to systematically go about this. So our goal was to create a care model that was actually supported by a business model so it could be sustainable.
Gotcha.
Now, if you're going to build a business like that, you're not going to be the flashiest, 40% growth, 40% margin every single year. You're going to be this slow, steady, consistent company. And what I tell our employees now, particularly the last several years, have been a lot of hype. There's been a big crash. There's a lot of, concern and uncertainty about the future. What I tell everyone is, what we're building is a real company. And what I mean by that is, we're going to build a company that produces a product that is valued in the competitive market, such that, and that we can deliver that product in a cost structure that we can generate a profit so that we can play what we call the infinite game.
Yes.
I don't think healthcare is solved simply and easily. It's a long-term thing. But if you're committed to that, and if you do this right, you're going to have a business that people value and is profitable and can continue to have impact and keep evolving. That's what I want to build. When I first started, I wanted to build a great hot startup that was going to go IPO.
Yep.
And because I've been beaten down through all of 15 years of doing this or whatever, now I have a clear-eyed, pure heart goal to build a company that is profitable, not to distribute to shareholders, but profitable so I can keep going and keep having.
Yeah.
And I'm humble enough to realize that, we're a small part of a very big thing, but can we be a catalyst, a little spark of light somewhere to give hope that this can be done? That's really what we're aspiring to do at Crossover.
Were you born with that fire in your belly? I mean, have you always been a high energy, go get 'em kind of guy, or is this something that evolved over time?
I think it's kind of a slow burn. I think I will say the one thing, growing up where I did and how I did, one of the gifts that I think my dad gave all the kids was just this ability to you can do whatever you want if you're willing to work. That's great to say to a kid, but I actually kind of believe it. And so there's this sense at Crossover where there's a phrase we use, which, without context, it might not come across the right way, but what we say is what was once impossible becomes improbable and ultimately inevitable. And this idea of inevitability, which is the right thing is going to prevail and we want to be a part of that. And as a startup, as a young company, you got to will a lot of stuff to happen. And so maybe as part of that slow burn to kind of just keep building, and other people want to be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
They don't want to just go to some dreary job. You put your head down, you slug your 8 hours and you head out. They want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of a mission. And we view this as a mission to really rethink, reformulate how primary care can be done and done sustainably.
Yeah. See, I want you to expound a little bit on your vision. What is Crossover Health today? What's your vision for it? Maybe you could start with, and I know you know this term because you play in VC circles, the elevator pitch for Crossover Health. And then follow that up with, we'll go a little bit deeper into some of those aspects and how you've made that happen.
The quick elevator pitch to know what we do is simply that Crossover Health is a national medical group that works primarily with self-insured employers who are trying to achieve lower costs, higher quality, and a better experience. Now, to unpack that, what we were saying is, we chose to work exclusively with the self-insured payer market. And the reason for that is that we feel that employers are a very unique type of payer. They don't think of themselves as payers, but they are. They're paying directly for all their funds. They're self-insured. And so they're looking for value. They're looking for differentiated experience. They're competing for talent. They want a lower cost. They want all these things kind of wrapped up and delivered. And because of the unique partnership we felt that, we could have with employers, we felt that would be a great place for us to focus. So we have never accepted fee-for-service for any of the payments we've ever received. It's always directly from the client. And so in order for me to get hard-earned dollars from any of these clients, I've got to provide a service that has enough value they're willing to pay me for.
Yes.
So Crossover, what we did is we bring a unique flavor of what we call primary health. It's not just primary care, but it's also mental health, physical therapy, health coaching, and care navigation bundled together. That's our core service. We deliver that service on campus through what we call on-sites. These are centers, health centers that are built on the campus, or we build a similar type center, but is a near site, which means it's near multiple employers. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we also deliver it virtually. So same care team model can be delivered through either one of those channels. And in most cases with our employers, they're using at least two or all three channels: on-site, near-site, virtual, in-person, online, anytime. Now, a couple other aspects about the model. So in addition to the care, those teams work together. Our care teams are assigned to a population so that there's accountability. You don't just get a random crossover doctor every time you need something. You're getting your team. Gotcha. And so the teams consist of, a couple doctors, a couple of these services, so you can kind of manage a population, but they are there's a there's a designated care team for a defined population, which creates the accountability.
Yep.
Payment model is directly from the employer, and we're value-based because they pay directly for it, but also there's a performance element to this. We need to meet certain performance objectives. Most of those objectives start out at the beginning of the relationship as engagement, utilization, experience, and over time, they begin to move into all the HEDIS measures, prevention, screening, into ultimately managing care, and then ultimately still the total cost of care.
Right.
Because we believe so strongly in primary care that if it's done right and done well, and people, attribute to our practices, we believe that we can actually deliver downstream savings because the way care works. And it's not just me believing this. There's whole consensus studies. This is one book that I would really recommend all your readers, Implementing High Quality Primary Care by the National Academy of Science. But they'll go through, they have just 5,000 references about why primary care is important. Maybe the biggest innovation, Robert, that we've done is to add a business model to the care model.
It's interesting to me too that you chose commercial insurance as your target, because there are so many companies out there that just do Medicare Advantage because there is so much profit, frankly, to just be clear, in the Medicare Advantage space today. How long that lasts is anybody's guess, but there certainly has been a heyday for Medicare Advantage. And one of the things that I think about addressing the business community is you're also addressing an issue that is on every business owner's mind, which is, how am I going to sustain the cost of healthcare and remain competitive nationally and internationally? So there's a double benefit. Not only are you providing better care, but you're also alleviating some of that pressure on businesses that takes dollars away from core business to pay for health care for employees. If you can bring that cost down and improve the quality, you're actually supporting business as well.
It's interesting. Again, as I mentioned, employers are a unique type of payer because everything that they're spending on healthcare could have been dollars that would have dropped to the bottom line for other aspects of their business.
Right.
So this is core, it's existential for them. And when this is the only part of their supply chain that is unmanaged. It just goes up 10 to 15% a year, every single year, and it's out of control. And they don't really have any levers. Like I can control every other aspect of my supply chain, and this one is just like unmanaged.
Yeah.
And so for the first time ever, we're kind of coming in and saying, hey, not only, because for decades people have been trying to, throw a little nurse line at it, throw this at it, throw this at it.
Right.
Digital point solution, throw that. And we're just like, hey, stop the nonsense. What is first principles? What actually drives down costs? How should you do it? Well, good primary care, good relationships, good connectivity. Now I steer, guide, and navigate you into the secondary care system. Boom, here comes a mechanism for you to really do that. And so, again, I wish I could say we're bringing all this new innovation and novel things. It's core, good basics, but maybe the biggest innovation is tying a care model to a business model that actually can work and be sustainable.
I don't know how many sports fans are out there, but the way I've always thought about this, I love the point that you're making, by the way, is until you have established blocking and tackling, you can't run a West Coast offense. You can't get fancy or you can, but not successfully in the long term.
Won't be sustainable
until you get the basics down. And that's the way I think about it. And
what's interesting is the current market economy we're in is going to you're going to get back to basics. Everything else is going to be boiled off. I mean, you can just look at how companies are literally shedding, their employees, services, other things, and they're all looking at these things. So if you're not creating value in this environment, you will not be there. And so what we're saying is, if you're going back to basics, what is first principles? What is core? What is the very minimum stuff that you should be doing to set the stage to manage everything else? And I do think as you boil that down, what's going to come out in a beautiful, shiny luster is the value of primary health.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear. And the other thing, there have been a couple of notions that have struck me as dead on. Really key, and one of them is actually Verta Health is the one who coined this term, continuous remote care.
Yeah.
And, the meaning of that, and also hybrid care. In other words, it ain't just, bricks and mortar with some patch telemedicine on the side. And it's not just telemedicine, without the bricks and mortar to back it up. It's the combination, that hybrid that actually delivers the best care. I want my doc to be local. I want to be able to see them, but I also want to be able to use telemedicine when it's appropriate because it's so much more convenient. So that combo is really important. And when I say continuous remote care, what I mean by that is there is the ability to interface with my healthcare team 365. That I've got the ability to ask a question, silly or not, at any time, and get an answer back in a reasonable amount of time. And patients have always had this notion of, I don't want to bother the doctor with that. I don't want to bother the doctor with that. Well, if you got team-based care, you don't have to, because the doc has, a team of people that are there to help them function optimally for their patient population. Does that all make sense to you? Is that?
I love it. I mean, what you're describing is the transition to streaming healthcare, right? And people understand this because of streaming videos and movies. It used to be you have to wait and you get the thing in the mail, or you go pick it up at the store and then later on it came in the mail, and now you just click on the TV. And we are 100% believers in this concept, is that you shouldn't have to choose one versus the other. It should really be both. It's not an either or, it's an and question. Your doctor, of course, you want to be able to go meet them at some point and build that relationship, because so much of care is in that relationship. But that relationship should be extended through technology and just the common connectivity, email, chat, whatever. I also love what you're saying is that what I'm finding with my own journey on health is I have a crossover care team as well. The person I interact with the most? It's the care navigator.
Yes.
I'm constantly like, hey, I need this, I need that. And they are like coordinating all these quick little things. And I never feel like I'm bothering the doctor or the team, because that's just built in. It's streaming. Now, in order to manage care, cost of care, you do have to be connected to the members. So this idea of at least giving them a communication channel. Now, in the future, Robert, I believe you'll be more instrumented. I'm wearing the Aura ring, right? Aura ring. People wear the watch. And right now, doctors don't 100% know what to do with all this data that's streaming in. But, over time, the patient will be more instrumented. They'll be connected to a practice. There'll be people monitoring them. And it with all their permission, and we're going to get to a great place. And I'm excited about that world if it's done on a permission basis. But that is what we're heading into. And I do think the primary care team is best positioned to do that. And I look forward to how this will evolve over time.
Scott, I love the concepts and embrace all of what you've been saying. We're going to run short on time. I want to at least spend some time on some key partnerships that Crossover Health has developed. And specifically, you're working with a company that I know a little something about, Aetna. So talk to us about the Aetna deal, and where is that operating now? And
I appreciate that. Yeah, this is a really exciting venture for us because, we've exclusively worked with self-insured employers, but, employers, the payers have a big role with employers as well, and they are active in the commercial segment. And one of the things, Robert, that we've thought a lot about is, we did talk about Medicare Advantage. We do think overall it's a better model. I know there's some challenges with it, and there's also some really, great studies showing that it does have an impact. Yeah. But Medicare Advantage has really taken off. And what our comment was to the employers is, hey, well, I get that for that subsegment of the population. It's a new care delivery model. It's a payment model. It's an outcomes model. Why isn't that same concept exist in the commercial space? Where is commercial advantage? And so we went to the payers, in this case, Aetna, and said, hey, Aetna, I know you guys understand the value of primary care. I know you have a bunch of different initiatives around that. Why don't we create a commercial advantage plan that employers could join? They get a great care model. It's going to be tied to the right incentives with the payment model. And then we'll work on the engagement, and then we're going to drive to specific outcomes. And we're already doing it in the Medicare space. Why don't we just do it over here? And so Aetna was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And they have a lot of leaders on their side, Catherine Gaffigan,
Yes.
and others that are really strong believers in primary care. This just seemed like a natural match. So what we're doing is we're partnering in the Seattle area to co-sell this solution to new employers who can now get the advantages of this model. And ultimately, we want to make this a plan design that people opt into and to scale it to multiple other markets, which we're really excited about. And so we're just at the very beginnings of that. We just launched in January. We're a couple weeks in.
Yeah.
We're looking to forward all the excitement ahead.
That's exciting. It really is. I wonder, as you know, healthcare is incredibly local. Do you see this model scaling differently in different areas and different populations?
It's a great question. We do notice that we get a little bit of that local model with our history has been different employers. And so, an Apple versus a Meta versus a Comcast versus, a manufacturing facility, they're very different. What we find that you might find interesting is it's the same kind of care model construct, but the constituent parts are different. When you're working in a manufacturing area, the middle of the country, you might have more physical therapy and a little bit more social work. When you're in a high, tech area, you might have more mental health and then, other programming. And so, but it's the same care model. So I do think that it flexes. And to your point, healthcare is very local. One of the challenges with national providers like ourselves is you got to be in all 50 states, but you can't boil the ocean. What we end up doing is kind of concentrating in specific medical service areas, MSAs.
Right.
And that's really just to get to some scale and some operational efficiency. And this is why, we're not going to be the solution for every single person in America, but, we want to be a catalyst to show that this can be done at scale.
Yeah.
And so to get to those few pockets is where we're going to play. So.
Scott, I wish it weren't so, but we are almost out of time. I want to respect your time. I think this likely deserves a follow-up, maybe 6 months, a year, to see how that's going up in Seattle. Any other markets that you're looking at right now? Or
we're not prepared to announce this publicly, but we are looking actively at dozens of these markets and seeing where we can go have the biggest impact in close partnership with Aetna. So we look forward to expanding there. So that should be exciting.
Well, that's fantastic. It has been a great pleasure meeting you. I have one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. And the question is this: what is your number one tip for folks who aspire to do something similar to what you're doing, leadership? What's your number one tip?
I get a lot of inbound, a lot of college students. I do talk at different, pre-med groups or, even residency programs. And what I always tell everyone is the biggest thing is you got to find something that you're passionate about that creates value, real value. And then you've got to be willing to totally go for it, because you will be told no 1,000 times before 9 a.m. And you got to be willing to walk through doors. And I'll go back to that little comment about inevitable. It's a little funny phrase within crossover, but it's kind of become a watchword for us that there are times when you just have to press forward. You have to believe it. You have to believe it until others can see it.
Well, Scott, your energy, your passion are evident, and I love the path that you're on. And we're gonna, if you'll agree to it, you don't have to tell me now, but we'd love to have you come back at some point and update us on your progress.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert, for all your time and interest, and we look forward to hopefully being able to talk again.
Thank you, Scott, so much. And Scott Shreeve, MD of Crossover Health. And with that, we're going to say so long for now. Bye-bye. You've been listening to The Groves Connection, your connection to the inside story on healthcare, featuring in-depth interviews with those who know. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review to keep the connection going, and hit the subscribe button to be sure you never miss a beat. The Groves Connection is produced by Dr. Robert Groves. Original music, editing, and creative direction provided by Alden Groves. Production support, content guidance, courtesy of Janae Sharp and Elizabeth Barrett. Thank you for listening. The professional ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and do not reflect those of any current or past employers. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time on the Groves Connection.